Now on the underside of these same threads which are on the top, we're going to turn this over and we're just going to clean up around the underside here, guys, because we'll be welding onto this. These particular threads that I used, that I was able to get, unfortunately were galvanized. So that's why it's pretty important to get rid of that galvanization. It'll just burn really hot when you start welding it, especially with threaded rod that's galvanized. It's even more volatile because of the air gap with the thread. So we just get rid of that galvanization. There'll be more there, guys. You can't get rid of it all because they're threads, and we don't want to take too much material out, otherwise we're going to compromise the structural integrity of our trolleys, but we need to clean that up a little bit. So guys, with the plate that you haven't cleaned, all right, obviously you don't want to have to clean more plate off. So this plate will ultimately go on the top where our motor mount bracket gets welded onto this, all right. So the plate that's not cleaned up, you'll just rough this into place for now, because all we need to do is clean the underside of this plate where we're going to be welding underneath, and you'll take enough material off to get this roughly centered. So just get it by eye centered, all right. Just make a little mark on the ends of your plate. Turn that over, guys. Line those marks up with the other side like this, right. You can put a ruler on. I'm just using my Sharpie here. Right, and this is roughly the area where the rod is going to sit underneath. So I'm going to clean all this off now with my sanding disc. Okay, that's ready to now weld. Now what we're going to do, guys, is make sure, obviously, that it's the bearings that are the furthest apart. We're working on this side, the top side. And so make sure you've taken that material off. Now what we've got here, guys, we've got 170 millimeter spacing, all right, between nut to nut, all right, 170. So guys, that's going to be 85 millimeters is going to be our halfway mark along here. All right. $85 millimeters. Thankfully, I've got a flexible ruler here. I can bend it down. All right. Mark that with a Sharpie. You need to see this with your holes we're about to locate our plate. Get this accurate, guys. 85. So where we've done our holes here in the middle, all right, when we sit those on our plate, we can look through and line that plate up with those holes. There's your central location for your plate. Now, there's a couple of things we can do here. We'll tweak this, okay? We'll fine tune this. Obviously, our trolley plate, guys, is 100 millimeters in width. All right, so let's mark our halfway mark here, which is 50. Let's mark our halfway point of our 100 here as well, which is 50, right to the edge. Or even just inboard a little bit won't hurt. Just mark your 50 millimeter mark. Draw a line between these. Okay, and line those marks up, guys, with the marks we just put on our... So you're lining up these dots that you've put here, guys, which center your piece through your holes. All right, and then you're lining up these marks, your halfway marks on your 100 to get this square. And centered on your rod. There we go. Now, once that's in place, guys, and centered, we're going to do a little plug weld. We're going to weld through our holes here, connecting our rod to this. So you're sort of welding against where you've drilled your holes into the rod, all right? It doesn't have to be a major weld. This is just to hold it in place so we can turn it over and weld the underside, all right? So you'll just get your MIG welder on an angle so it's contacting the side of your holes, your 10mm holes here, and also it's welding into the rod on top, and you'll be laughing. So just before you do, guys, just check everything, make sure nothing's moved, wobbled around too much. And that's what we're going to do, guys, to get that centrally located there. So get some clamps on. Once your clamps are on, guys, do some final checks to make sure things haven't moved. Look down your holes, guys, make sure this is still aligned this way with your holes. You can do some quick measurements off your plate. 20, 20, 20, 20. So there you go, guys, you can measure. You should have 20mm clearance between that plate and your trolley plate. That means it's squared, it's centered, and I'm going to plug weld. Just leave your clamp in place, guys, till it just cools off a little bit. We'll have to do a bit of cleaning up, guys, once this is welded again, unfortunately. But I'm going to recommend you use the canola oil again. Okay, guys, that's welded in place now beautifully. And we can get our weld in earnest happening on this guy. And those with a keen eye, those with a keen eye will have seen that the doctor's welded this upside down. It's not upside down as far as our bolt locations goes, guys, but I've welded it where I cleaned off the underside, which is meant to go here. So, guess what I'm going to have to do? I'm going to have to get a cut-off disc, alright, because this is the easiest way to clean high or low tolerance areas is probably the way to say this. I do want this to be clean when I weld this, so this is pretty damn annoying that I've cocked that up, but this happens all the time, guys, little cock-ups. Right, now I can just use that very gently to do the same thing. And we only need to weld on the outside, guys. Don't need to weld on the inside. Outside weld is going to be strong enough. And we just do the usual thing, guys. About a 30mm long bead at the end, in the centre, on the end. Both sides, outside, guys. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my canola oil all around here, guys, so then I don't get weld splatter on my threads and on my clean parts on the inside here. Being galvanised rod, guys, it will be particularly violent with the amount of weld splatter. So do liberally coat your parts there, guys, with our canola oil, including at the ends where your nuts are. Okay, and have it in this orientation when you weld, guys, so then your weld melts in downways, okay? Get rid of your flammables. Now guys, you'll end up probably with a little bit of beading in your holes. You could have squirted a bit of canola in those holes as well if you wanted to. I'm not too worried about that. Okay, that's your plate on, ready to sort out plate number 2, our template. It's a good idea, guys, just to run your sandpaper disc over this top piece. Just make sure there's no slag or beading that's going to inhibit your top one going on. So you'll just double check those things. So I know, guys, this is going to be so hard for you to believe what I'm about to tell you, okay? But I went down to Bunnings the other day to get some 25mm M8 bolts, which will be used for the rear traction loss coupling connection and our front motor mount connection. And guess what? Oh, that's right. They didn't have any stock of 25mm. They had 15mm, too short. They had 40mm, way too long. So I had to buy the 40mm ones, and I had to cut them down to bolts that they should have had in stock. I can't even begin to talk about this. This is how we will couple these guys together. This is a bit warm now. Now remember, guys, the way you orientate this is going to be completely how you drilled it, all right? Now for me, I had a little notch out of my plate because there was a hole here and I cut straight through the hole on this bit of scrap. So that's how I orientated mine. So mine's pretty easy to orientate again. You'll soon know, guys, because it won't line up if it's not on the right way. So you'll have to work that out simply by moving that around. Our M8 bolts are going to go through like this. I've had to round the ends of these off where I cut them down from 40mm. You'll need your nuts, guys, and you will need a washer on the underside. Probably don't really need to put a washer on these right now because this is not going to be permanent, but it does need to be in place to get our motor mount bracket on here in its right location, centered. And I did a pretty good job rounding those bolts off. I'm used to it now. I'm used to it now because I've had to do it with so many bolts and things that I couldn't get at Bunnings. You know, I had to buy the other stuff, different sizes, because they didn't have the stock at Bunnings. Fucking Bunnings. 25mm length bolt, guys, will give you enough thread for your nut to completely be threaded on correctly for strength. So what we're going to build today is our motor mount brackets. So what we need to do is we need to cut some plate that's going to weld on the end of our 65 by 35 by 4mm box. So I'm just going to interject here and just let you know that you don't require this 65 by 35mm front motor mount bracket to have a 4mm thick wall. This was material I had left over from some car ramps I built. So save yourself some money and get yourself some 65mm by 35mm box and just get it in 2mm wall thickness. In turn, our timber Merbau decking will then be bolted to these plates, and they in turn hold our motors. So what you'll do is you'll cut a length of 280 millimeter 75 by 5 mil flat steel. So you're going to have 280 millimeters of your 75 by 5 mil flat steel cut. You'll find the center of that, which is 140 millimeters. You'll make a mark, you'll put your square on at 140 millimeters, draw a line. These are now our 2 pieces of plate. Keep a nice long piece, because then it's going to be much easier for you guys to work with the long piece. If we just cut these 140 millimeter lengths and then mark them up and try and drill them, then it's much harder for you to hold small pieces, particularly if you don't have a drill press and you're working with a hand drill on the floor like we've shown in our other videos. It's just going to be much easier for you to measure this all up as 2 pieces before you cut them. That way you've got a lot of material to put your foot on, etc., to hold your piece while you're working on it. So now we need to find our drill points for both of our plates. It's really easy. Across your 280 millimeter workpiece here, now you might have it even longer like mine, that's fine. You only need 2 140 millimeter plates. Ultimately that's what you're going to end up with. But if you measure this up like I have on this piece and it's longer, it doesn't matter. You're just going to cut these pieces off the long piece. But anyway, so you could start with your 280 millimeter length of steel that we've marked up here and just mark 10 millimeters right along. Make a mark there, make a mark sort of midway, another mark here, and then on those 10 millimeter marks, put your ruler and draw a line. Do exactly the same on the bottom side. Make a mark, 10 millimeters up from the edge, mark it, put your ruler on the marks, draw a line. Then from your edge here, you'll measure in 25 millimeters. Make a mark at 25 millimeters, put your square on, draw a line. Now this is our midway point here, okay, that's our 140 millimeters. All right, so you'll measure in 25 millimeters from that midway point. Make a mark, put your square on, draw a line. On the other side of that mark, exactly the same thing. Measure in 25 mil, make a mark, draw a line, and then at the end here, where we'll be cutting off here for our second 140 millimeter plate, you'll measure in 25 millimeters, make a mark, put your square on, draw a line, and now where all of those lines intersect, you'll punch and you'll drill, and your finishing hole diameter on these punch marks will be 8 millimeters to take your M8 bolt. Okay guys, there's your piece drilled. So you'll need to turn this over when you've drilled, and you'll need to put your grinder where your drills come through, because this will all be jagged. So clean that all up nice and smooth so it's nice and safe. Right, then you're going to be ready to cut your plates to their sizes that you need. So if you've only measured the 280 and that's the piece you've got, you've already cut it at 280, you've only got the one cut, which is here at 140 millimeters. If you put it on a longer piece like mine, well, you're going to have 2 cuts, 140 mil, and then you'll have to cut this one at 280. So you'll cut that, you'll cut them there. Same deal as always, guys. Nice straight angle grinder with your cutting discs, back and forth till you cut through. Once that's cut, what I would recommend is that you get all the mill scale off, okay? So while you're rounding all your corners and rounding off all your ends so it's nice and safe and chip and shard free, get your angle grinder, take all the mill scale off and get this back to shiny metal like this, so that it's already ready to paint when we put it on our bracket, and we don't have to try and grind that stuff off while it's welded on our bracket. So do all of that prep, and then we're ready to weld this on to our 65 by 35. So once you've cut your 2 140 millimeter lengths of plate and they're drilled and you've cleaned them completely up, you could shave in them, okay? That's what you're coming back to me with for us to now prep and weld onto our 65 by 35. Let's talk about how we're going to place these on the 65 by 35. So we can get these centered on our 65 by 35. Guys, you need to find the midway point of your 75, which is 37.5. And you need to draw a line dead in the center of your 75. So at 37.5, 2 lines. You need to measure 550 millimeters, and you're going to cut that very square. So it's nice and square, because this has to sit on our plates here. Okay, and if we don't cut that square, it's going to be crooked that way, or it's going to be crooked that way, and we can't afford that. This has to sit nice and square and nice and flat on our plates. Okay, so you have to get that cut square, guys. Okay, so then you need to find the midway point of your 550 millimeter length of 35 by 65, and that's 275 millimeters. And you just need to mark that, guys, because that's going to go in the very center of our mid frame. You will prep this for welding, okay? So you'll put your bevel in it on every face and take primer off enough so then there's no primer anywhere near our weld. You must do that for both ends, okay? So get a nice bevel right around, ready to basically have lots of fill weld and strength in these brackets. Obviously, these brackets are holding our motors, our front motors that are doing our pitch and roll. So we want these to be nice, strong welds here. So then our plates here never go anywhere. Once you've done that, you need to find the midway point of your 35 millimeter box here on both sides. All right, so let's get that flush on the end of our box there. 15, 16, 17.5. And make a mark at the bottom on both sides. So then when you place this on our plate here that we've marked the center of, we've found the center of our 75, those marks can be lined up with the plate, so you get this 65 box straight before you tack it to weld it. Okay, that's the aim of the game. And we will be welding it with the bottom face of our bracket flush with the bottom of our plate for both of our plates. Okay, so you've got your 65 by 35 set up dead center with the center of your 75 by 5 mil plate. Okay, the center line we drew and our center marks now on our 35 by 65 are lined up at the bottom and at the front. Double check, guys, double check before you tack weld this, that is definitely straight. We do not want these brackets that are holding our motors to be skewed. All right, so you make sure you line the center of your 35 millimeter box up with the center of your 75, and you need to tack this in every corner. Okay, and what you'll do is you'll do tacks that are diagonally opposite each other. So we'll put a tack here in this corner, then we'll go around and we'll put a tack in the opposite corner, then we'll do this corner, and then we'll do this corner around here. Okay, now I just want to double check that's lined up since I moved it. When your plate's really clean, okay, like this, it actually can be quite slippery. So if you need to move it around, double check, because it will move. That has moved. Okay, just me moving that little bit, this has moved out of alignment. So let's get this tacked and welded. I've got my fan on here to the left. Okay, I'm getting lots of nice air there, so I'm not going to be sucking in too many welding fumes. So as you can see, okay, it hasn't moved at all, right? Then we can put our beads in. Now, what you need to be aware of, I'd give this a little clean just before you start doing your main beads. What we need to be careful of, our holes here that our bolts come through our Merbau onto our plate here are quite close to our box on both sides, right? So we're going to only weld down to 10 millimeters before our bolt hole, because if we come all the way through, we'll end up putting weld up to our bolt hole here, and then our nut won't sit on our plate square. We don't want that. So you're going to stop, let me make a mark, we're going to stop here and here on our welds. Same with the other side. So you can mark this before you start. That's roughly where you want to stop your bead. We don't want to weld through there, or we're going to end up with weld too close to our bolt hole here. And this side is where our nut screws on, all right? So we have to avoid welding too close to those. Now, if you did cock it up and you ended up putting some weld across there, it is not the end of the world. You will be able to get your grinder and you would be able to grind that back flat. But to avoid having to spend the time having to do that, if you can keep your weld, finish your weld before you get to your holes, roughly 10 millimeters both sides. Before you get to your hole, you won't need to spend a whole bunch of time grinding the weld back off. Let's get a nice hot bead in. So that is generally what we want, guys, a good strong weld, and we want to stay away from those bolt holes. We put our wire brush on here now, you'll see this a little bit better. So if you get a good hot penetrating bead like that, then you are not going to ever have any problems with these brackets ever going anywhere, right? We've allowed space there for our nut, okay? That is going to be good for the life of your sim. You need to do that at both ends. You need to take your time and make sure that your 65 by 35 is square on your 75 by 5 plate. We need to make sure that where our brackets live, they can't come into contact with any of our motor connections here. These are the expensive Hall effect potentiometers. We don't want them to be damaged. So this means that for any of our bracketing, it needs to be away from potentially where this could come around and contact the bracket. If the doctor brings his square here back to his motor lever, okay, the distance from the edge of our motor lever here, the outside face of the motor lever, to where your bolt is going to end here is just a little under 40 millimeters. So to give ourselves a safety margin, we need to place our bracket 45 millimeters away from this. So that gives us about 7 millimeters clearance from where our bolt will be. So our bracket will be looking sort of something like this, if you can see that, which will allow any clearance issues if for some reason there's some malfunction with the software or with our electronics hardware and this starts running in a 360 degrees motion. Look, it'll be fun for us on the sim rig, but not so fun for our potentiometer brackets if we set them up too close. So we need a baseline measurement, okay, for these brackets, and that is going to be based off the face of our motor lever here. So what we need to do, because the brackets are going to run off the main bracketing assembly here that carries our motors, we need to get a mark on this bracket. So you'll put a square on like this, run it to the face of your motor lever here. Okay, get it on there. And then mark on the main carrying bracket here, mark along your square. Okay, can you see that? All right, measure to the face, get a mark on there with it square, right? And then we know from that face of our motor lever there, we need a 45mm clearance. So then we can measure out 45mm from that line, and we can mark that on our frame. Okay, that's going to give us our inside edge of our bracket. We cannot be any closer than that. All right, so that's the first measurement that you need to find. 45mm off the face of your motor lever. So that's the process that I went through to determine how to set up my potentiometer bracket. Unless you guys have done something with your build and things have gone pear-shaped, really you shouldn't have to go through that whole measuring process. If you are just building exactly what I've built, and you're copying me, these are the critical measurements here now really that you need to understand. You've just got to make sure that you put your 90-degree 30x30 angle 60mm to the face of that angle. You can see that in the top right-hand corner. This is my rig already built complete, just showing you there. The face of that angle needs to be 60mm from the Merbau timber motor mount bracket plate. As long as it's set 60mm straight out from that plate, you will be sweet with the way that that is set up, and it will clear your motor lever and the motor lever to top frame rod bolt. Okay peeps, we're going to build these brackets from our faithful 30x30 by 2mm thick angle. Okay, now what you need to do is you need to cut 2 lengths of 60mm in length. Get them all cleaned up, nice and shiny like this, everything rounded off, everything nice, everything tactile, as the doctor always says. Okay, you will measure the halfway mark of your width, all right? Halfway mark is 15mm, make a mark, 15mm, make a mark, put a ruler on, draw a line. Then you're going to get the halfway mark of your length, which is 30mm. Make a mark, put your square on, draw a line. What we're going to do with this is we're going to slot. We're going to put a slot in to the halfway point we've just marked on our 60mm pieces. Now the way that I've done this is I used my trusty angle grinder with a grinding disc, which is 5 to 6mm in thickness. All right, and I just used it to basically burrow its way in. So it gives us about a 6mm gap. All right, now it'll be a little bit rough using this. It'll, as in the metal when you're finished. So you'll need to get a little file or something like that. And then in the very end here, you'll need to just clean that up a little bit. Clean right along. You know, clean the back, make sure that all the burrs and stuff like that have been removed and it's nice and smooth. Now, the other thing to remember, guys, you need to locate them like this, in this orientation, okay? So then if you put your 2 pieces together like this, the slots were in the top. Okay, that's probably the best way for me to describe to you where to put the slots. Don't put one up here and one down the bottom. They both need to be in the top. And the angle has to be located like this. So if you put them together like that, your slots are in the top. Okay, to get our little 60mm slotted brackets in place here, guys, we just need to make sure that where we marked our mark on the top of our motor carrying bracket here, 60mm off our timber Merbau mounting plate there, just make a mark straight down from that 60mm point. So when we put our bracket on here, we can get it square with our line. You need to do that both sides. So you'll just repeat exactly what we did on this side on the other side. Okay guys, we need to get these slotted 30x30 angles on our main motor mount carry bracket here. And this is how you're going to orientate them, okay? So here's our motor, right? Here's our bracket with the slot facing the motor. Right, this is how you're going to line that up down along that line so you can get it square. Now just do a dummy fit, guys, and then with your Sharpie, mark around this, right, so you know where you're going to have to weld it. Take it away and then clean the primer off this bracket, ready to tack. We'll only be tacking this on the vertical, 2 tacks, and then 2 tacks across the back here. Our potentiometers don't need to carry any major weight. They just sit there. So we don't have to go crazy welding this. Just 4 tacks in total will be more than enough. Now, as you can see, the bracket sits proud off the top of the main motor mount bracket. It sits 25 millimeters above. So from the top of your bracket down to the top here on our motor mount carry bracket here is 25 millimeters. And that's how you'll locate it, and that's how you'll tack it. Now, what the doctor is going to use to connect across to his potentiometer. But maybe before we get to that, what's going to greatly assist you guys is if you actually install your motor to potentiometer tube. We'll be placing this on because that will help us work out distance for our cross bracket here that will house our potentiometer. This flat is 30 by 150 by 2 mil thick. Mark a centre along there, then measure in from this end 37 millimeters and make a mark, punch it and drill a hole. That is a 10 millimeter in diameter hole, okay? Now what I'll be doing is I'll actually be putting my angle grinder on this now and making a slot. So then we've got even more flexibility to align our potentiometer. And what we're about to do next, guys, this is where it really pays to hang on to some of your really short used cutting discs, because this will just make it a lot easier to cut this slot in this metal without making the slots too large. So always hang on to at least one of your used pieces of cut-off discs, because they're handy if you ever need to do any slotting. So that's just a tip from the doctor to you. What I've done is where my 10 millimeter hole is here, right? I've slotted that out with my angle grinder. It had to be this large because even with the smallest angle grinder disc, you still end up with a slot at a similar length to that, okay? Then I've needed to extend one end of it to pick up 2 bolts in our slot so then we don't get any of this. So then basically, when it sits in our slot here, it allows 2 bolts, right, in the slot, so it can't do this. And as you can see, that pretty much lines up as it is with the potentiometer, where the potentiometer is going to go through there, and there's enough slotting on that to give us a little bit of flexibility. And what I ended up having to do as well, guys, is I've ended up having to take some more material out of the slot. So originally where it came down to the 30 millimeter mark, I've dropped that probably down another 10 millimeters. Okay, and then I just had to go through my vast array of bits and pieces of nuts and bolts to find some little bolts that will come through. So what I'll do is these guys, right, when they go through here, I'll actually tack weld these on. So then they're permanently on there. So then that just goes through the slot, and it's just much easier then to do a nut up to the slot rather than having a hole both ends. So once I've put these through, I will tack weld this. Then when it comes in and sits in the slot, it's easy just to put a nut on the other side with a washer and do it up. So anyway, guys, that's what I've done using this type of modular bracketing, okay? If you're just using straight flat, I mean, you may have to do something similar. You might have to add a little bit at the bottom because you do need 2 bolts, so then you don't get the movement. Otherwise, it'll pivot on one bolt, and you don't want that, okay? Because you want as accurate readings from your potentiometer back to the Adreno as possible for your sim experience. So we need to, even though this doesn't need heaps of strength or brute force in it, it does need to remain rigid. So so then those potentiometers only send the information from them turning, no other unnecessary movement from the actual bracketing. That's basically it in a nutshell, guys. You will need to basically fiddle around. The most important measurement is that 10 millimeter hole. That's the hole diameter you need for those hall sensor potentiometers that are in the links. Okay, they fit through a 10 millimeter hole. So I'm going to put this on now, and then I'm going to put my potentiometer through this and in to the motor bracket so you can see it all set up. That's the finished product, doing it this way, okay? It still gives us the flex we want in our hose to allow any indiscrepancies between our motor shaft and our potentiometer connection. When you do this, you basically need to have your potentiometer in the bracket first, and you need to have your hose on the potentiometer first. And then you bring the whole bracket onto the connecting point in your shaft here. Okay, so you put your potentiometer, well, you put your hose clamps on the hose first, not tightened obviously. Then slide your potentiometer through your bracket here, nip it up on the other side with the nut, then put your hose on it, and then you bring the whole assembly with the hose hanging off it into alignment, and then slide that hose onto your connection here into your motor shaft. Then you can do these up. And that's the way to do it, guys. Now, you'll see why we needed to place these right on the edges to clear for our clearance, guys, when this bad boy is installed. Right, so what happens, guys, is we line this up now. We centre our motor mount bracket onto our plate, and we weld our motor mount bracket to this top plate that we've just made. So this is removable, obviously. We can remove this bracket if we need to do that. Okay, so I've got my marks already centered here in this direction that I can line up with these old marks here. As long as I've got that line there, which I'm going to draw back into there with my scribe. And again, because it's a rolled box, this 65 by 35, so I'll put my large footprint square on this. Get that scribed in. I've had to repair the bottom of this, guys, where I cut it off my 3-degree of freedom motion sim. I've repaired that. It's back up and running. Now this is the front, because these are our potentiometer brackets. I will take you through how to build these. They're not in the 3-degree of freedom motion sim tutorials, I'm pretty sure. So we'll go through where to place these and how to make these. These allow you adjustments on your potentiometer bracket to get your potentiometer completely aligned with your motor shaft, all right? So you get that centrally located. Centrally located. So you can get centrally located. So what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to make use of the fact that I already marked the centres when we lined that bottom plate up. So I'm going to put my ruler on those marks on my trolley plate here. I'm going to line them up, and I'm going to very carefully hold this very firmly, get a scribe in that way. Okay, so there's my centre. There's my centre in that direction. I can't, my nut, these, oh no, that bolt's free there. So we're weapons free. I'll get that scribed in halfway there. So now that's in the ballpark of being centred, I'm just going to get this centred, guys, with measurements. I'm going to clamp this, my cheater system here that I have. I'm going to get my dividers. Any excuse to use a set of dividers. I'm going to measure 32 millimetres on my dividers. And we've gone out this way a little bit as well then. Check the back, guys, make sure it's lined up. Great stuff. Okay. So that's another way you can do it, guys, if you've got a set of dividers. So now I'm going to weld this in. I'm going to get this welded on. Well, that is your lot for today. So until I see you in the next tutorial, you guys stay safe, stay healthy, and take it easy out there.